I think we're ready to welcome our next speaker. Martin Yarnit has developed an expertise in food hubs through research and travel. Martin, are you with us? Are you ready for your presentation?
I am. Good afternoon. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. And over to you, Martin. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, in 2007, I was living in a small village in Herefordshire, and I was one of a small group of people who set up a village shop, a cooperatively owned and run village shop. And 5 years later, we got a lot of money from the National Lottery to recreate it with new premises as a local food centre. We doubled the amount of local food we were selling in the shop. And when the pandemic came along, I was no longer living in the village, but when the pandemic came along, that doubled again. So over the years from 2007 to 2021, the turnover of local food in the shop quadrupled. However, what this showed me was that however well we had done in this respect, we were still making very, very small progress in affecting the livelihood of local producers. As we know, local producers and farmers generally receive a tiny amount of the value added in the whole of the food chain. And I began to wonder about what we could do about that. And in 2019, with the help of a travel award from the Winston Churchill Trust, I went to Italy and to the States. And in the States, I traveled from the West Coast, Portland, Oregon, to the East Coast of Philadelphia via Chicago and Charlottesburg to have a look at food hubs. Since around about the 2010, the United States Department of Agriculture has helped set up more than 200 food hubs across the United States. The big job is to aggregate and distribute what I've called good food, good in the sense that it's good for the planet, good for farmers' incomes, and also good for consumers. The business model of the food hubs is primarily, although not exclusively, wholesale. In other words, it's aimed at the catering and hospitality sector. It uses public procurement to boost turnover, and it uses very sophisticated IT systems for tracking the provenance and deliveries in the system and to pay payments and invoices. I went to have a look at one of the brand new food hubs in Portland, Oregon, the Red on Salmon Street. It had opened only a few weeks before I arrived. It consisted of more or less 20,000 square feet of repurposed warehouse, which had cost $20 million to set up, and which now provides a base of more than 120 food businesses of all kinds. So it brings together and distributes produce from small and medium-sized farmers all over the region. And it also supports them technically to enhance their output sustainably all year round. So it supplies schools and hospitals, canteens, restaurants, and also a regional supermarket with food. And it has, interestingly, a big focus on Black and people of colour as producers and consumers. And it specialises in working with schools to produce school meals in disadvantaged areas. So if you go to the Red, what you'll see is a gigantic warehouse with lots of storage fridges and freezers, training kitchens, with space for food outlets, cafes and restaurants, and you might be there when there's a wedding taking place. So this helped to create for me a kind of a vision, and that vision I've set out at the top of the slide. I've said in every neighbourhood, we expect a health centre and a children's centre. We should also expect a food centre, a local food hub that caters for everyone's needs, regardless of means, as well as providing a food insurance safety net for people who are struggling to feed themselves and their children. And that's my main conclusion from a quick review of food trends in the UK and the US. Moving on to the next slide, if maybe I could do it. Oh, here we go. One of the other things I've done the last couple of years is really to look around at what's happening with the food scene, particularly in the UK. There's been an enormous explosion of creativity, of new systems. I mean, for example, in the last year or so, more than 500 new fruit and vegetable box schemes have been started up across the UK. So there's a lot going on. But the surprising and in some ways frustrating thing about this is that we're generating all kinds of different models, but often there isn't very much connection between the models or people thinking about where their model stands in relation to other things. So I think I've been able to identify 5 particular kind of things which people refer to as food hubs. Including beginning with Regather in Sheffield, a retail aggregation and distribution hub. So it uses produce from its own and multiple sources, including abroad, including Spain, to distribute around the city. Other food hubs add to that a number of social facilities, including community centres, cafes, training courses, and so on. And then there's the other kind of food hub, which doesn't actually produce very much food except in its own community garden, but which focuses on all the social functions of food, including a local food market, training courses in food preparation and service, and so on. So you get the idea. There are a number of different kinds of models of food hubs. And what strikes me is that if only we could find some way of combining the strengths of these different models, what we would be able to do is to tackle 3 of the bugbears of the alternative food scene. That's to say, the lack of scale, the fragmentation, and also the reputation, often misplaced, for being unaffordable food. So thinking about what kind of development principles we would want to apply to food hubs of that kind, it struck me that if we're going to learn from the lessons of the States, we want to have the broadest customer base. We want it to be retail and wholesale, boosted by public procurement, to produce scale and a viable business model. That means there has to be serious investment, and I don't see why the City Council and the Mayor of South Yorkshire and also local investment funds shouldn't be tapped to produce a serious investment fund for local food hubs. It should combine selling and the social functions in one space. It should bring people together. And above all, what it should do is to begin to overcome one of the biggest problems of our food system, which is the segregation of people who can't afford food, the people who are cash poor, from the people who can shop wherever they like. We're beginning to see all over the country a campaign, a commitment to the right to food. And one of the ways of dealing with that commitment we can see in Scotland, in Moray, where the council has devoted money to provide direct support to people who are cash poor so that they can shop wherever they want to. Sheffield, I think, has a number of local assets that we can draw on. To begin with, we have really a new city council, which is beginning to look again at ways of the different political parties working together. And that should provide a new base for a relaunched food partnership in the city. We need to work on a principle which I think we'll hear a lot about today, and which is the view that the people know better, not necessarily best, but they know better, and that we should be trying to develop a bottom-up food culture which takes into account the views of the people who use it. We should be repurposing public assets to create new warehouses and local centres for food. But above all, we have this big challenge. We have to find ways of linking food banks and food box users. And there are ways of doing that, providing we can bring them together in the same places, in the same organisations. We can cross-fertilise ideas and we can support people who need food banks. Finally, let's see, as Duncan has said, to what extent we can drive up localised production of food. In a blog I wrote for the Farming and Countryside Commission a while ago, I suggested ways in which we could begin to overcome our dependence on food imports. It's absolutely crazy that we import apples. It's crazy that we import onions. These are all products that we should be able to support easily from within our own systems. So that in a nutshell is the idea. Food hubs in every town or city, local food centres in every neighbourhood. This isn't a blueprint, it's simply one possible model for running a cooperatively owned and run system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. And I hope everyone can see just how quickly discussions around food system challenges can become very expansive and sophisticated. But we need concepts like food hubs to kind of penetrate and cut through all of that. So thank you very much, Martin.